So in this lesson, we're going to do three things. We're going to know and practice the three ways to dispute an argument. We will understand the three levels of ethical analysis. And then we will understand two competing viewpoints of business itself and how it relates to studying business ethics. To start, I want to talk about a situation that is brought up in our textbook. So it talks about Anne Marie Wagner's studies at the University of Alabama. So she pays about $1,200 a year for textbooks, which is exasperating to her. And it really makes her kind of mad, is especially her textbook in her composition class called A Writer's Reference. It's a custom-made book for the University of Alabama. It's the same as the Writer's Reference sold everywhere, but it only has a few slight modifications. There are 32 extra pages that describe the school's particular writing program. The Alabama logo is right there on the front cover, and for an extra, then there's an extra $6 to the price tag, which isn't much, but one wonders, why am I paying an extra $6 for a textbook that I can purchase that's exactly the same except for the logo and a few pages about the school's particular writing component. So Anne Marie might argue, hey, this is wrong. This is a conflict of interest because you have the school that's obviously, or the faculty member, pardon me, that's potentially benefiting from this, she thinks, with the extra money. The university promises to do the best job in providing an education, but are they really doing that because now I have to work more to get more money to pay for the textbook, and since I'm working more, that means I'm going to study less, so the university really isn't providing me with the best education. And it just wants to take money from the students and give it to their faculty members. So that's her argument. And so we have to ask ourselves, was this a good argument, right? Well, one of the ways we can look at that is, well, let's look at how do we analyze an argument and dispute a potential argument. Well, there are three ways to dispute an argument. We can dispute the facts, we can question the values that one is espousing as they frame this dilemma or this argument, and then we can kind of refute the reasoning. So, for example, let's just say that someone wants to argue with Anne Marie and say, hold on a second. So you could dispute the facts. Well, for example, students may not actually take time away from their studies for the work, but perhaps maybe they may take time away from their social life, their parties or whatever. So maybe they can't party as much, they have to go to work in order to pay for their textbook. But the amount of time that they study isn't actually less, even though Anne Marie seems to say that it is. Or perhaps maybe the faculty aren't really going off on these lavish vacations that she kind of implies that the faculty members are earning a ton of money. Even if they were earning the money directly, the $6 extra that they're paying wouldn't really amount to much. The truth of the matter is, with a custom text, the faculty doesn't get any extra money. It's the publisher that gets the money that makes the custom text. Now, in this case, Alabama might be the actual publisher, so the university may do that. But most of the time when you see a custom-made text, it's not, especially at a place like Oklahoma Christian, where it's a small university that doesn't have its own publishing house. It's the publisher, McGraw-Hill, Pearson, whomever it might be, that actually gets the money. So the faculty wouldn't actually be getting the money. We could dispute the values. In other words, students may pay more, but their education may actually be enhanced. For example, she's saying, well, the school should be looking out for the students' best interests. Well, maybe the school is looking out for the students' best interests. This particular custom book included a section that's about the University of Alabama's particular writing program and kind of what they're looking for. And so perhaps what they're doing is laying out for the student a better way to approach writing so that they can perform better in the Alabama classroom. And so they really have the same values. They're trying to help the student out. And so Sarah kind of not Sarah, I keep calling her Sarah, Anne Marie is questioning the values. And one might argue, well, we are actually adhering to those same values. We could refute the reasoning. Could be debated the extent to which students are actually harmed or may also benefit from the custom text, something that I was already kind of talking about earlier, that really there is benefit to them having the custom text. So 3 ways to dispute an argument: dispute the facts, dispute the values, or dispute the reasoning. So there's another way one might argue, not necessarily based on facts, values, or reasoning. They may use what's called a slippery slope argument. So a slippery slope argument is one that just kind of says, well, based on this one instance, look what might happen in the future, and boy, that may be something we want to avoid in the future. To demonstrate that, let me go back to the Baby Teresa case that we looked at in the very first video. So someone might say, man, if we were to take Baby Teresa's organs in order to benefit other babies, then we might decide that it's right to take the lives of other children, not just anencephalic babies, but babies that, who knows what, maybe babies that that are in other ways handicapped, or babies that are of some race that we may not prefer, or hair color that we don't like, or something like that. And so, man, this is just opening up Pandora's box and a slippery slope, and so therefore we shouldn't do it. Well, there are some problems with this type of argument. Well, of course, here's the three steps. If we accept that it's right to take Baby Teresa's life to benefit others, we will decide it's right to take the lives of others. That would be monstrous, so therefore we shouldn't do that. Well, the problem with this is a slippery slope argument assumes that a trend is going to get worse. That may or may not come to fruition. Just because an action is done once doesn't mean it's going to be perpetuated, nor does it mean that it's going to be furthered. And so you're really basing your argument on pure conjecture, pure hypothesis that's baseless. And so therefore, while the conclusion that we shouldn't take Baby Teresa's life may be drawn, it shouldn't be based on merely a slippery slope argument. It's not a very strong basis upon which to stand for an argument. You need to find stronger ground, stronger foundation. So there's 3 different levels of ethical analysis that we can look at. On the one level, we have morals. Morals are kind of, if you will, occupy the most fundamental level of ethical analysis. These are direct rules that we simply ought to follow. It doesn't really involve much debate. It involves specific guidelines that should be followed. For example, in Baby Teresa's example, one morality that probably most people would agree to, no debate, is it's simply wrong to kill an innocent person, right? Or in the custom textbook example, it's wrong to deceive people about the nature of the difference in textbooks. In other words, if someone were to try to portray the University of Alabama's writer's reference book as significantly different than the normal book, that probably is deceptive. So most people would agree it's not right, it's not moral to deceive others. Ethics, on the other hand, that is a level that it's a little bit more of a gray area, if you will. Ethics answers exactly what specific rules should be followed, right? What are my guidelines that may or may not necessarily be obeyed? So in Baby Teresa's example, ethics might say, can we end the life of an innocent person if he or she has no prospect of actually engaging in life? Is it really taking someone's life if it means that biological life will never feel emotions, never have an opportunity to interact with others, never be able to feel or express love, never be able to learn to have joy? If they're never going to have that, are we really taking the life? And so therefore ethics might say, well, maybe we can take this life, and some ethics might say maybe we shouldn't. Depends upon the moral philosophy that you're approaching that dilemma from. Custom textbooks as an example. One may say that the schools are ethically wrong to use the custom texts, that they shouldn't try to burden their students with extra cost. But I don't think anybody would say that they're morally wrong, that they've somehow violated some fundamental moral principle. So there's a little bit of the difference between morals and ethics. Meta-ethics are simply more abstract or theoretical discussions surrounding what's right and what's wrong. And meta-ethics really kind of deals with more the origin of what we think is right and what's wrong. Where do ethics come from? Why do we have ethical rules and moral categories in the first place? And to whom do those moral rules apply? So what ethics does not equal is the law. So just because something's legal doesn't necessarily make it ethical. And so therefore, we know that while they may be related, ethics doesn't necessarily equal the law. Likewise, what's ethical is not necessarily the most practical thing or the most prudent thing. Someone might say, well, this is the most practical action, so therefore we should do it. Just because something is practical, again, doesn't necessarily make it right. Custom or our culture and what we practice in our culture doesn't necessarily mean it's ethical. There are plenty of examples from history where cultures had certain practices and accepted practices at one point in time, only to later view those same practices as being unethical. And then peer pressure obviously is not ethics, because just because you are surrounded by a bunch of people who think that something is right or thinks that something is wrong doesn't necessarily mean that it actually is right or wrong. You may merely be succumbing to peer pressure. And so therefore, just like custom is not ethics, neither is peer pressure. So lastly, I want to talk about two extreme views of business. Now, you usually don't find anybody that sits clearly in either one of these two camps, but to talk about the extremes, let's talk about the extremes. So there's basically kind of two viewpoints of business. Kind of have this tug of war going on. One says, well, if business left to itself will correct itself, and then will ultimately be a benefit to society. We should just let it be and let it go, and the market will kind of take care of itself. And then on the other hand, someone might say, no, business needs to be policed. If you leave business to itself, they're just greedy and exploitive, and it's not a benefit to society. So on the one hand, you have people who say, you know what, consumers will end up punishing companies that lie and cheat. On the other hand, you might say, well, no, if you don't regulate companies, they'll only harm the consumers and actually hold back economic progress. Or when it comes to policing, you say, look at some people might say, look at all the scandals we've had in business, whether it's the Volkswagen company that cheated on its emissions testing with software that kind of got around emissions testing, making their cars look cleaner than what they really were, or whether it's corporations that don't pay their workers a fair living wage while their top executives are making millions of dollars. And so some might say, look here, this is just wrong, we need to put an end to it. But then you may have others that say, really, do they need policing? Because if deception was practiced by everyone, no one would benefit, because everyone would know everyone's lying. So can we really be deceptive and ultimately benefit from it? No, it'll catch up to us, and it won't be good. And so therefore, people will police themselves. So these are the two kind of extremes views of business, and that leads us to kind of this libertarian free market view that says, hey, business is okay, it'll take care of itself, or this market regulation viewpoint. So on the one hand, this libertarian free market viewpoint says, you know what, if companies are found to be doing something wrong, like when Nike was found to be some of their manufacturing companies that they contract with were found to be exploiting their workers, child labor, unfair wages in developing countries and such, consumers started to boycott Nike. Or more recently, when Sherwin-Williams was found to have lead in their paint, and which was causing mercury poisoning in some people and really harming the people, there was a large boycott against Sherwin-Williams paint. So therefore, they had to change their practices. Some might also say that, look, if you look at countries, that have espoused capitalism, they are much better off than those that don't. And so, for example, the average income in the United States is about $59,000 a year. That's the average income for a normal person in the United States. In North Korea, it's $1,700 for the average person. 100% of the people in America have access to electricity. Only a third of the people in North Korea. As far as internet and education is concerned, 76% of the people are connected to the internet in the United States. No one in North Korea. Our infant mortality rate is significantly lower than in North Korea, and our life expectancy is significantly higher. Some would point to the fact that companies that are looking out for the needs and looking out for the benefits of consumers has brought these results around. And so therefore, leave business alone, they'll take care of themselves. Market regulators say, hold on a second. If you leave businesses to their own devices, bad things happen. Financial crises like we saw in 2009 where people's livelihoods were lost due to the greed of investment banks and mortgage brokers and such. Or we have companies like Volkswagen or Monsanto and others that make pollutants for our world that they're just going to destroy our world, and so therefore we need to regulate them. So they have two different sides here that look at business and say, what do we do about business? And so this makes it important to kind of study business ethics to say, what are the limits that should be placed on business and its practices? What is right in business and what is wrong? And so we'll look at that through the rest of this class. So in summary for this, after all of this, we should know, of Chapter 1, we should know 3 ways to dispute an argument. That you can dispute the facts, question the values, or refute the reasoning. We need to understand the 3 levels of ethical analysis, whether it's meta-ethics about where does morals come from, or ideas of right and wrong and who they apply to, the ethics themselves, kind of the general rules and guidelines that one should follow, and then just morals, these kind of underlying principles that pretty much everyone agrees to. And then the fact that there are 2 competing views to business. There's this libertarian free market view. Business is going to be fine and will take care of itself. In the market regulation, it says, no, it really does need to be policed. And there needs to be some limits placed on business.